There's been one new case of COVID-19 in South Australia overnight, and he's also reinforcing to members of the state that if you are arriving from overseas, you must follow protocol and self-isolate for 14 days. Meanwhile, 3 passengers on a cruise ship off the coast of New Zealand are being tested for COVID-19. Let's go live now to New Zealand correspondent Jackson Williams for more. Jackson, when will the test results be known?
Tomorrow. Until then, Danica, these 3 passengers will remain in quarantine on this cruise ship that's berthed at Akaroa here in the Canterbury region in New Zealand, South Island. Meanwhile, the rest of the passengers, they have to stay on this ship until further notice, until whether or not we know if these cases are confirmed or otherwise. One of these cases is being treated as a suspected case of COVID-19. The symptoms that this person have, they are consistent with coronavirus. We know that 2 of these 3 people who are being tested for COVID-19, that in the past 14 days they had close contact with an infected individual. The Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, has been rather coy when pressed this afternoon on what planning is underway by health authorities if some of these test results do come back positive. Nonetheless, he says authorities are in a better position as a result of recent outbreaks on other cruise ships, and there are many lessons to take away from those.
One of the things that's important, of course, is to not leave everybody on board and to make a really careful risk assessment early of the risk of people, and then ensure that you can manage the risk of further infection.
And Jackson, tough new border restrictions in New Zealand come into effect tonight.
These restrictions were announced by Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern 24 hours ago, and they are very similar to what we have just seen announced by her Australian counterpart, Scott Morrison. The Prime Minister says the unprecedented situation concerning coronavirus globally responds an unprecedented response from her government. It means that from 1 a.m. tonight, very early tomorrow morning, anyone except from people travelling from Pacific Island nations will be required to self-isolate for 14 days. This includes all Kiwi citizens returning home. The Prime Minister says that the government has quarantine powers up its sleeves if people refuse to self-isolate.
We're going to step up that enforcement, things like spot checks to ensure people are self-isolating. And if you don't self-isolate, there are quarantine powers available to us. We can put you in a facility and monitor your movements.
Danica, there's still no community transmission here in New Zealand. However, there have been 2 new confirmed cases of COVID-19, taking the total number of cases in this country to 8. One of the 2 new cases that was confirmed today is an Australian man. He travelled to New Zealand, arriving in Wellington yesterday morning. What is concerning, what has disappointed New Zealand's top health official, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, is that this individual was actually tested for coronavirus before boarding that flight from Australia to New Zealand. It wasn't until he arrived in Wellington, was at a cafe yesterday morning, when his Australian doctor called him, notifying him that he did have coronavirus. Dr. Ashley Bloomfield says he'll be following up with health authorities in Australia to ensure that they are providing sufficient health advice to all confirmed cases of coronavirus.
Jackson Williams live in Christchurch. Thank you for the update.